Hello, and welcome to the Holistic Living, Learning, and Loving podcast, where we are bringing you back to the basics.
We explore sustainable living and holistic health and strive for progress, not perfection.
So please join us on a wellness journey and feel empowered to make positive changes in your life. Hey guys, welcome back. We are so happy that you are here to join us for another podcast. This is our first podcast of 2025. We took last week off and we did not tell anybody because we're just bad girls. No posts, just not there. We had to go incognito for a week. Today we're back and ready to chat. So please, before we get started, please, if you're on YouTube, please give us a like, a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications whenever we release our next podcast. If you are on Apple or Spotify or however you listen to podcasts, please subscribe to our channel there and enable notifications. We really appreciate it. Send to a friend if it vibes with you, but we appreciate that you're here. And today we are going to talk about epigenetics, which is really interesting. How I had to wrap my head around epigenetics, and Rachel's really going to go into epigenetics more, but I just kind of had to break it down on a cellular level. So basically every cell in our body has this complete manuscript of a table of contents for our whole entire body. Every single function, it's almost like a book, like a catalog showing you how to build a house, and it has every little thing that you need to know, like the cabinets and the chairs and everything that is in your house. So basically our body has that same table of contents that it gives to all of our cells, and all of our cells have it, and different things can happen with it, which is what we're going to talk about. But DNA is in every cell. There's two different kinds of cells. There's germ cells and somatic cells. Germ cells are sperm and egg cells, embryonic cells. That's the cells that bring new life into creation. And then there's somatic cells, which is every other cell in the body. And all the somatic cells are actually receptive to change and interference with environmental conditions and emotions and nature versus nurture. So the germ cells, they actually don't respond to these things. They can't be changed. And typically when a new baby is born or conceived at that embryonic stage of life, the slate for their DNA is typically wiped clean, mostly, not all the way, but mostly the cells are wiped clean and start off fresh from this new copy, this fresh start.
So what's the thing about it getting there? What gets wiped clean? I'm trying to wrap my brain around it.
Yeah. So whenever a baby is born, we have the sperm and the egg, and those are the germ cells. Those cells, you can't change them because of environmental factors. Really, they're pretty steady in what information that they have. And what information they have is this new copy of life, basically this blank slate, this new table of contents that is stripped of any other information, for the most part, not everything, but it goes in and makes an embryo. And this embryo is like a fresh start. It's got all its own genes that it gets from the mom and the dad, and it's making this fresh copy. And the somatic cells are just all the other cells in our body that do their own functions, and those can usually be changed from environmental factors. Like this cell might be exposed to smoke all the time and develop cancer in the lungs or whatever, like that kind of stuff.
It's not like a clean, fresh start completely, because you still are inheriting from your parents, and that's not all great things.
Yes.
Always.
Yep.
But that's, yeah, so I was just trying to understand.
In genetics, it's okay, if you're an animal, you have a brown coat or black eyes or whatever, these inherited traits. But then how does the animal know instinctually how to survive from a very early age? Where does that come from? Because it doesn't seem like that gets transmitted, but it obviously does, you know?
Yeah. Like our traits, our characteristics and personality traits and things like that also get carried over in some way or form.
It's just
survival
really cool.
instincts and
yes, how to get water. How do they know they need water when you're a baby,
Yeah, and just our ways of reacting to things and handling situations and all kinds of things, which is what we're going to get into.
So basically, genetics and epigenetics, there's chemical modifications to DNA that regulate whether genes are turned on or off through methods besides changes to the DNA sequence, So there's this DNA sequence, like we talked about, that get inherited when you're born, when you're in an embryonic stage. But there's other things that turn genes on and off throughout life. That's what we're going to talk about. Like we said, most of those modifications that happen over life, the modifications, the changes to DNA that an adult has over life, are removed when the germ cells are, making embryos, but not all of that happens. So So those changes can be passed down from the parent to why? Oh, the parent to the daughter cell.
Yeah, like, in cells divide, you have the parent cell and then it divides into daughter cells.
Yeah.
So these changes can be passed down. That's how epigenetics works. Like the changes are passed down from as the cells divide, these changes they keep going. That's how these epigenetics can change for generations and generations, not just within generations of cells within your body, but generations of your offspring.
Yeah, like ancestral
Yeah.
history, basically. And then also, I learned is say you have a twins and they were in the same placental sac, they're identical twins, okay, exactly the same. And you separate them at birth and expose them to different things. I mean, they have the same DNA and all that stuff, but they will be different because of different genes that are expressed in their lives. So I thought
Yeah,
that was pretty interesting.
definitely. I mean, that's like proof of how outside influences affect us genetically.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
like, and forgive us because we're still learning too. Rachel and I are
yeah.
both learning, and we bring different things to this podcast, and we don't talk about it beforehand. And so we're also just teaching each other these things and also connecting the dots in our own brains. We are not experts at this. We are learning, but it's very interesting.
Well, we're not really necessarily coming here to teach you about it because obviously, if you were going to come to learn, like really the nitty gritty of something, you're not going to come here to learn it. It's really supposed to be like us just having a candid conversation about these big topics and kind of explaining our take on it and how we use it in our lives
Yes.
as a regular mom and wife in this world. Not as a scientist, not as
Mm-hmm.
a doctor, just as a regular person. Like, how do you take this information and actually use it to make your life better? And from
Yes.
our point of view, because when you're hearing it from researchers and scientists and doctors, it's just not relatable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, but how am I even going to do anything with that? So I feel like our podcast is to show you guys how we transform that information into usable information.
Yes. And to create a spark of interest, maybe if this, like, oh man, this is really
Yeah.
cool, then you go on and you explore that and find all the resources that you can find on it that ignite your passion for learning.
Yeah. And just show you that regular moms and people can understand this information. You're not too stupid or whatever because you didn't go to college to be a doctor or whatever. You can understand this in simple terms and make sense of it. But yeah, we're obviously not experts, but I find this very interesting. And I really, really wanted to do a podcast on this since we started the podcast because I feel like epigenetics is the basics of everything when you want to start living a healthier life, not just as in food or chemicals and toxins, but also in spirituality, in every which way, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
once you understand epigenetics, that is going to give you the motivation to make all the changes in your life. At least it did for me, because it's really the basics of why everything affects you and changes you. So when it comes to epigenetics, it's really important to understand what microRNAs are. When I first started reading up on this, I kind of confused it for messenger RNA. I don't know how many of you remember biology in school. I mean, I went to nursing school. I did a lot of biology and A&P and all that. But so yeah, I learned a lot about messenger RNA, but no, microRNAs are different. So I'm
She's
just
got
going
a
to
book
read
out.
this.
She's
Yeah, I
got the
got
book out.
which is this Regenerate by Sayer G. It's kind of a they say it's an easy read, but it's it's an easy read
Like
for
if you're
probably
stranded
a
on a
doctor.
deserted island
uh,
and you have to read it.
yeah. Well, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it, but it's still kind of difficult words and stuff. I guess it would be an easy read for a doctor or scientist, but maybe not for the regular person. But anyway, so I'll just read this little bit because it's a great explanation. So, unlike messenger RNAs, whose job is to carry instructions from DNA into ribosomes where they are transcribed into proteins, microRNAs turn on and off the expression of a wide range of our genes through silencing messenger RNA. MicroRNAs are transported in virus-sized exosomes or specialized membrane-enclosed nano-sized vesicles secreted by all plant, animal, bacterial, and fungal cells. MicroRNAs survive the digestive process intact and function like software, altering the expression of the hardware that is our protein coding genes. So the most important takeaway with respect to these biomolecules, however, is that our genetic and epigenetic integrity may be wholly contingent upon the gene regulatory microRNAs embedded in our diet. He says just diet, but I would also add spirituality and environment, right? So basically, what he's saying is these microRNAs are in all plant, animal, fungi, bacterial cells. So when we eat a plant or an animal, they contain microRNAs which have the information from their life, their bodies, all the things that they have been consuming and living. And then that they can come into our bodies and communicate with our DNA, because forever scientists thought that aren't like RNAs, microRNAs, or just anything from different kingdoms like plant, animal, human could not communicate with each other. But they in fact can. That's what new science is revealing, that they can communicate with each other. So when we eat these things, it is communicating directly with our DNA through these microRNAs and altering the way our genes function, turning on and off genes. So that's really important to know. Sorry, I'm struggling here.
No, it's okay. We were by fire pits recently, and our lungs are all janky from it, I think.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how the environment and how our food and thing, I mean, you think, people say all the time, you are what you eat. And like, it really is true, because you're receiving information, you're receiving data from what we're eating and what we're exposed to in our homes and our conversations, and every single thing that we do and think in this life is impacting our internal structure.
Yes, like 100% in every which way. We are exactly what we eat and are exposed to. We are the people we're around, everything.
You are who you surround yourself with, but also too, you are your thoughts in your head. That's a hard one.
I feel like we could do a whole podcast on that, how thoughts actually become reality, and science is starting to catch up with that too.
Yes. Like if you tell yourself every single day negative things, then you will be those things.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go back in time and realize how many thoughts actually have become reality in your head, in your life.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard concept to think about, but I know in my life I can think about so many, and I'm not talking about just one random thought that comes to your head. I'm talking about thoughts that you persistently think about.
Yeah.
That become reality. But just to kind of drive this home, they have these 3 studies that which I'm not going to read them. I have the book out, but
all right, put the book away.
So they had this study with rats, and they were exposed to these insecticides and fungicides, but they were pregnant rats, and they were exposed to these 2 chemicals, resulted in male infertility and decreased sperm production and viability in 90% of the males of all 4 subsequent generations that were tracked. So that means the 4 generations of offspring after those pregnant mice were exposed to that had the decreased sperm production and all of that.
So it's lasting.
Right. And there's other studies that prove that it can even go further, or that they suspect that it can go even further than that. And then they have another one where they had rats that were exposed to this cherry scent. And every time that they were exposed to this cherry scent, they would electrically shock them, which is awful, but they'd be torturing these rats.
I just think this is very prevalent in the animal testing community. It's just, really,
rats
really
get it the worst, man.
Yeah,
it's like somehow
too.
Yeah, somehow I feel like we've written rats off though. It's like this, like every study's about rats, and it's like somehow it just doesn't matter what you do to rats. Nobody cares, but I mean, you pull out any other animal, it's a big deal, but you can torture some rats. Yeah, and nobody blinks an eye.
I don't like it at all.
I mean, it gives us a lot of good information, but yeah, it's awful. So yeah.
So what do they do with the cherry fragrance?
They
give them the trauma.
Yeah, they give electric shocks every time they're exposed to the cherry scent. And then despite never having encountered the chemical before, mice in the 2 successive generations shuddered significantly more in its presence when compared with the control group.
Wow.
Yeah. And then in another one, there was children of Holocaust survivors have shown the intergenerational effects of stress and tragedy by exhibiting altered profiles of stress hormones, which has predisposed them to anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy.
That was for the survivors of the Holocaust, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's the offspring of the survivors of the
Yeah.
Holocaust that they are, even though they didn't experience the Holocaust at all, they are more prone to having PTSD, anxiety, and depression.
Yeah, bringing me down. I'm so empathetic. It's like talking about the
Oh,
rats and the Holocaust survivors. I'm just like, I don't like it.
yeah, like they did a study on rats, and they put this human melanoma tumor tracer enzyme into the mice, and it's showing that it was being stored in their sperm cells, and that they suspect that that's how it's being transferred to other generations
Hmm.
because it's in the sperm cells. I feel like there's a lot of people who have whole families where grandma, mom, daughter are all, or dads and sons, whatever, are all dealing with the same similar kind of disease, especially when it comes to Crohn's and all sort of colitis and stuff like that. And they're
And
just,
also like mental disorders.
yeah, mental disorders and many other things too. This is just stuff that I've been seeing, and or just they all have the same kind of disease, right? And they think that they're just screwed, right? They're just like, oh, I'm screwed genetically. I have bad genes. So many people think this, and it's just, yes, we are predisposed to certain diseases genetically, like more prone to getting those certain diseases, but it doesn't mean that we are going to get them no matter what, that there's nothing we can do to stop it. That just means that those genes are being turned on, that we are being exposed to outside factors of our environment, our food, maybe even our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and that are turning those genes on. That those genes are there waiting to be turned on. They may never be turned on if you live a healthier lifestyle, but if you live a really bad lifestyle or unhealthy lifestyle, then your chances of that gene getting flipped on are higher. And the gene that will get flipped on is the same, could be the same gene as your grandmother and your daughter. And you understand?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the gist of that. I really want people to know that, because I feel like so many people, they lose hope. They think that they're screwed. There's nothing they can do. They just have bad genes. I just hear it so much. And there is hope. There's so much you can do. And even though you've already turned that gene on, that you can turn it back off.
Yeah, it
Like you
just
can
means
totally
that
turn things around.
it means that you have to focus a little harder on that than maybe someone
Yeah.
else who doesn't have that. Then that's a focus area for you. And you know that, and you know that it's something that you have to work on. Because in life, we all have things that we have to work on, all different things. And none of us are the same in exactly what troubles us for disease wise or mentally or anything. But we all just have different things that we need to focus on. And that, if you see that that's a persistent thing in your family lineage and that's telling you, hey, I need to try to investigate why this is happening and what maybe I can do to better my lifestyle from my mom or grandmother or
Yeah.
whatever.
But I mean, generally overall, I would just focus on just trying to live a healthier style all around, because you never know what genes could be lurking, ready to
Mm-hmm.
be turned on. So it's just, I would try to do the best you can in every area
Yep.
that you can. So yeah, genes are not set in stone. They're not unchangeable, which, I mean, yeah, your actual DNA is unchangeable, but like we said, certain things get turned on and off through these microRNAs in our environment.
You know what I think is really interesting too? I've been hearing a lot of things lately about trauma. Okay, I'm obsessed with my trauma. And that our trauma can also be inherited. So not just the genes and all these things that change it, but that also our trauma can be inherited from our parents and things like that. And that specifically there's some stuff right now I've seen where whenever you're born, all of your eggs as a woman are inside your body, right? They're already in your ovaries waiting to come out. You have a finite amount of eggs. They don't just magically reappear or anything like that. You have them all inside of you at birth. And so, conceivably, and then also your mother has all of her eggs. So, they can actually relate back to where, like, we are present in our grandmother's traumas.
So say your mom, you're not alive yet, but your mom has all her eggs, and she's being exposed to a trauma of some kind, let's say
Mm-hmm.
molestation. All right. Well, that information, trauma is not just like this thing that it's not physical, right? it gets stored as information, right? It's not like just this thing, like a thought that doesn't really exist. It does get stored. It's information that gets stored in your body. So it's being stored in the cells of her body and also in her eggs.
And it's being stored in the owner's manual for our body. It's in
Right. So
there
when
like a page.
Right. So when she goes and gets pregnant and that egg gets fertilized and you're the egg, that information is there, right? And they're
Yes.
also saying that they have studies that are showing that this trauma or information can get stored in the sperm cells of men. So that's how this information gets passed on for generations to generations to generations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in trauma, of course, yeah, people got to think of it as not just like something you're experiencing. It's actually changing and affecting your body. It's information that gets stored in your body. Just like they say stress makes you ill, right? Physically
Mm-hmm.
ill. How does stress make you physically ill? Same thing as a negative thought in trauma, right? Can make you ill and structurally change your body and the way your genes are expressed.
Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting because not only do we have to heal from our own traumas that we witnessed, but also acknowledging, if you can, the traumas that your ancestors had and trying to make peace with that too.
Yeah, well, like, 'cause it can also make you maybe more predisposed to certain mental health challenges, right? Like, for example, if you're always struggling with depression and you feel like you don't really have a reason to be depressed, and you're like wondering why am I always feeling down and I don't really have any good reason for it? Well, I mean, it could be generations of depression and trauma being passed down. Not that it's hopeless to change it, but it's like Heather said earlier, it's something you might have to focus on more and really kind of change your thought processes and do what you can to turn that around and break those generational cycles.
Yes, because until you like break that and break free from how you react to things and how you process that trauma and all that stuff, then you're just passing it on to your next generation and their generations. And it takes someone in your family to finally break that generational trauma, I think, and release it for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that our generation is the chain breakers, right? I think this is
Mm-hmm.
a great time to break those chains and really end those generational curses and traumas
Yes.
being passed down, because we have so much information available to us now and we know and understand how to change it, or it's available for us to learn.
It's
And
it's inside. I just strongly believe it's inside of us. If you sit down and you start meditating consistently over months and months, you will figure it out. It will just
yeah,
come to you.
and
You don't
that's
have to
kind
like
of
know anything.
that's kind of what I was getting to next. The remedy is nature's pharmacopoeia, like exercise, mindfulness, healthy, nutritious whole foods, and spirituality can optimize your body's innate resilience. And of course, avoiding these toxins and negative thoughts and mind states as much as possible. So
Yes.
we really need to get back in touch with nature. We are supposed to be in nature. I know I say that all the time, but we really are. Being inside of our house, under artificial light, staring at artificial light all the time. You know, nothing is natural around us. Our bodies are so out of touch with the things that give us our innate, um, what, like,
Happiness,
yeah, like
joy de
just
vie or whatever, joy of
our
life.
instincts too. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Just like the animals, they, like you said, they're just born, they know how to do these things. Well, because we've had so many generations born under these artificial conditions, we're like losing that,
Yeah, and
you know?
also because it's not just art, it's this act of making everything easy that
Yeah.
has in turn made us think less and socialize less and connect less and be on autopilot and just be just
Yeah, we're
wanting,
not using it, you know?
yeah,
You use it,
we
you
just want
lose
to be on
it.
our phone and like staring at junk all day. If we, that's like, what everyone will revert to without having consciousness about it.
Yeah. So, but like you said, when you go outside and get in nature and meditate, I highly recommend doing it outside in nature. It's
Yes.
like things just start to come back to you. You
Mm-hmm.
start to get these downloads of information and um, clarity, like a clarity on things that just didn't make sense before. And you know what? It's really just like taking the time to think,
Yeah.
you know, or to just ponder and, I don't know, ask for guidance and pray and whatever it is. Ask
Mm-hmm.
your spirit guides for guidance, whatever. That really works.
Really
Now, don't go
does.
expect to do it one time and then, oh, all questions are answered, but it's like working a muscle.
Yeah, it's just like being able to just sit there and clear your mind for a few minutes, Be appreciative of nature, be appreciative for what you have in life. And whenever you can do that, things will come to you
Yeah.
over time. And the more time you do it and the more time you spend exercising that muscle, your mind muscle, the better it gets.
And we need to stop ignoring our intuition, right? I feel like so many of us are constantly getting intuitive thoughts that tell us that we need to do this or that, but because sometimes it might seem so out of the norm, or maybe like, oh, I couldn't do that, like that's not normal, I shouldn't do that, that would be crazy, or whatever it is. But we get these strong senses or intuition for a reason, and I think
Mm-hmm.
at the very least you should start paying attention to it and ask more questions or dive deeper into it and start
Journal
building
it.
your intuition back up and trusting yourself, right? Because we're just like the animals, we have that ability,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah, like
know.
all the stuff that our ancestors went through and they learned, and all those lessons, they're deep inside of us, just waiting to be released. But you
Right.
have to calm your mind down and stop thinking about the news and politics and tragedies and all these distractions that are in our lives and just focus on yourself.
Right. And with the news and all the distractions, we are not meant to consume all of the tragedies in the world. We need to just know what's going on around us, our own community. I know that's really hard to do, but it's true. That's too overstimulating. It's a lot of, it's just traumatic.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
traumatic. Like, I can't watch that stuff, man. I don't
it's,
even, I can't.
it's overstimulating. It's distracting, extremely distracting. I always say when I meditate, everybody has to go, or I just have to be in a separate room. You know what I mean? I can't be around because it's distracting. You can't find clarity and focus on your intuition and all of these things with distractions. You
Yeah.
know, if your phone's blowing up and ringing, or your kids are in your ear asking you a million questions, and or you're just worried about all the things that are going on all over the world, all these people's problems. It's sad, it's terrible, but we can't fix the entire world, we can't worry about the entire world. You
Mm-hmm.
know, all we can do is change ourselves and lead by example.
Yeah.
It's
You know
the
what?
best thing you can do.
So in my meditation yesterday, I struggle with control issues all the time, like trying to control everything and multiple people's life, you know. And in meditation yesterday, I just got this download that the only thing I control is myself and my reactions to people and my kids and how I communicate and all these things. And it's so hard to control yourself when you get mad or sad or whatever. It's hard. Like you just want to lash out or whatever, you want to yell to your kids, whatever. It's so hard. But that's why we need to put all of our focus in controlling ourselves, because it takes that much focus to be able to do it. You can't
Yeah.
be worried about everything else because you need all of your attention on what you are doing for yourself.
And also all of that other stuff is going to trigger you to be more angry and reactive because you have all these negative things going on in your mind and passing through. Whether you think it's affecting you or not, it certainly is. All of
Yeah.
that gets stored in your subconscious and affects the way that you think and react to things. So we really, like you said, all of our attention and focus needs to go on ourselves. And then that's how we make true change, because we're leading by a better example for our husbands, wives, children, and then that affects
Parents.
them, and then they change the way they live. I mean, people always say children learn better by watching you than listening to you, but I
Mm,
heard consciously Erin said this the last video I watched of her. She was like, but adults really do too. And it's so true. I've learned that so much in the past few years, that people don't really learn by anything I say. Like I could say it and they're just, it's whatever. But adults are the same way. They learn by watching what I do and seeing the results,
yeah.
right? When they see you doing something and then they see the results you're getting, that is the best way to make people change. And then, so when people will change seeing you, and then they do that and people change seeing them, and that's a domino effect, right? That's
Yes.
the best way to make change in the world, and epigenetically.
Yes,
Right?
because we're teaching our children how to do this and they will just have it. They don't have to work as hard as we do because they will
Yeah.
know it. Like my kids are only 4 years old. Like imagine what I can teach them, but it's never ever too late. Like I see changes in my parents because I've changed
Yeah.
myself
Me
in my
too.
relationships.
Me too. And my parents, well, mainly my dad and my mom too. I mean, she understands, but you know, it's a little harder for her. But also I've seen so many changes in my husband and my kids, you
Hmm.
know. which is awesome. I think that's awesome. And I'm only a few years into this. So, imagine the real change we can make. And then imagine the change our kids are going to make because they've been exposed to this for so much longer,
Mm-hmm.
and then so on. And that's how we're really going to break this generational cycle of traumas and disease being passed down
Mm-hmm.
and have a way better world,
Yes.
But just like those microRNAs turns our genes on and off to that present with disease,
Mm-hmm.
they can do the same thing to give us health. They're not just used for our demise. They can also give us life, give us health. When we eat whole, healthy, clean foods, that's going to give us health and
Mm-hmm.
help us to think more clearly, and build our intuition better when we're eating clean foods in our environment, all of that. The less we're exposed to dangerous chemicals and toxins, we're giving our body the ability to not present with disease.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things, even like mold,
Yeah.
that can totally derail people and cause all kind of issues that are just starting to be known, how that can like totally interfere with your body and its functions. And you have to raise your consciousness, not only spiritually, but the food you eat, the products you put on your skin, the air you breathe, your materials around you, everything plays a part in this healthy lifestyle. Getting active, being mobile, having good relationships with the people you love, just all the stuff in our podcast episodes. Tune in.
Yeah. And before we kind of end all of this, I wanted to bring up, because I forgot to earlier, how
She got the book again.
because this was so big to me when I was learning about epigenetics and Monsanto with
Roundup.
Roundup and
Ugh.
glyphosate. This is so people, we're always telling people it's bad. It's bad. You don't want it on your food. But I always like for people to know why it's bad, because telling people something's bad isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why glyphosate is bad, and it has everything to do with epigenetics and microRNAs. So in 2017, Dow Chemical Company, in partnership with Monsanto, America's most powerful agricultural biotechnology corporation at the time, received EPA approval to produce corn genetically modified to make an RNA-based pesticidal agent that lethally targets a metabolic pathway within the corn rootworm, known within the industry as the billion-dollar bug. Branded as SmartStax Pro, the newly minted proprietary GMO plant produces a small double-stranded RNA that disrupts a critical gene within the rootworm, causing its demise. Now, they thought that this RNA sequence or whatever couldn't basically communicate with our cells. Just
Yes.
like I said earlier.
That it
But as
just
we
does the
know,
worm and like nothing else.
right. And what it does is, I remember reading elsewhere that it causes holes in their gut or their digestive system, which is what
Mm-hmm.
causes its demise. And they thought it couldn't do this in humans because they thought it couldn't, plant cells couldn't communicate with human cells, but in fact they can. So what it's doing in us is the same thing it's doing in the rootworm. Of course, it doesn't kill us right away like it does the rootworm, because we're
Yeah.
much bigger and stronger, but it's causing holes in our guts and all kinds of problems. Not just that, I'm sure, but that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's telling our bodies to essentially do the same thing,
Exactly.
which is terrifying. And that's why I won't touch GMOs unless, of course, I do, like if we're like out of town and I go eat or
Yeah.
something. But as far as like food I'm buying for my house, I don't do
It's
GMOs.
the
That's
exception, not the rule.
right. Like, I find that GMOs are one of the most scariest things.
Well, it's because it's like it's toxicity, all right? Everything is toxic. It just depends on the dose. Even water is toxic if you drink too much of it. And so all of this stuff, like think about the flea and tick prevention stuff you put on your pets, okay? It's doing something to disrupt the cycle of fleas. But you have to understand that it's not just going to do it to the flea. And that's what we are conditioned to believe in our
Yeah.
society, that that's all it's going to do. It's totally fine, right? But you just need to question, like, does that sound right? Is that intuitive? Does that make sense? Because if it does it to that, why wouldn't it do it to me?
Right. And that's just because science hasn't always dug deep into these topics. They just want to get these products out. So
Yes.
they just research what they want to research to prove that their product is going to be great. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody, the FDA, the EPA, nobody's really questioning this stuff. And now we're starting to figure this out. But in the past, we weren't. And that's why we always thought that these things were safe. But the thing that freaks me out with GMOs, though, is that it's literally altering our DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and the way our DNA is expressed, which I guess everything does, but it's like
Yeah.
man made, and that kind of freaks me out.
Yeah. But Roundup is a beast. And I feel like everybody, you really should look into that and do a deep dive and adjust your diet the way you can so that you are not ingesting it because it's in everything. And a lot of people don't realize that the FDA actually approves Roundup to be used as a desiccant on our dried beans and dried goods. So
And
if you're buying,
grains.
yeah, if you're buying conventional grains like wheat, rice, conventional beans, black beans, white beans, whatever beans, 9 times out of 10 when that product is farmed, it's collected from the farms, it is sprayed with Roundup and that is packaged and sent to you not washed, fully you are fully eating that. And when you're going to restaurants and you're eating those products, unless you're at an organic restaurant, you are eating that too. So just
Right.
you have
So
to be
like
aware.
so with regular produce, they spray it, but it's sitting out in the weather, it gets rained on, washed off, wears off after time, which doesn't make it safe. It's still there and it's still altering that plant's DNA.
Yes.
But it's not what Heather's talking about is it's sprayed right before it's being packaged. They're spraying it on there to dry this plant out so that it can be packaged quicker because they don't want to wait for
Yes.
it to dry out on its own.
Convenience.
Yeah. And we're just eating straight
Just
Roundup.
yes, just like I mean, you may as well just go get the bottle from Home Depot and spray it right in your mouth. Like, why don't you just use it as a condiment? It's like a hot sauce.
And then that's why probably so many of us are sick because Americans eat so many grains.
I know.
We have a very grain heavy diet, which in and of itself, if you even taking out the Roundup is not right. We shouldn't be eating that many grains. We're not made to eat grains like that. But you add Roundup on top of it,
Mm.
it's just like a recipe for disaster for
Yep.
our health.
Yes, and it's like all these gut problems everybody has in the gut,
Yeah.
is the key
The
to our
second
whole
brain.
yes, it's like the key to our whole well-being. If you have a bad gut, then you probably have inflammation, eczema, inflammatory diseases, and all these different rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, who knows? It's so
It
much
usually
goes into that.
Yeah, like it usually always stems from the gut. Most diseases stem from the gut. Like that's usually the root cause of most diseases. So if you're struggling with anything, just go focus on healing your gut first. That's what
Yes.
I did.
Yep. Heal
But
your gut, heal your mind, heal your negative self-talk, and
definitely.
you're going to be so much happier because you did those things.
Yes, and I really want people to try to start being more spiritual in whatever way that you resonate with or identify with, even if it's just going outside and just meditating, just whatever. If you
Just
just
go
want
outside
to,
and be grateful.
yeah,
Find something to be grateful about, and then that's going to start your mind on the right journey.
right,
It's
exactly.
step number 1.
Right.
Go be
Because I feel
grateful.
like spirituality is just as important as our food and environment, if not more. So just to plant that seed in everyone's mind.
All right, so we feel like everybody has the power inside of themselves to be happier and be healthier. And every week we do these podcasts on topics that we believe is fundamentally important for our health and happiness. And that's why we're sharing it with you. Open your mind, think outside the box, question everything. Don't just go along with it because it's the way it's done. That might not necessarily be the right answer just because things have happened because it's simpler, and simpler is usually a bad thing, unfortunately, in most cases. I'm sure there's cases where simplicity is great, but typically we've used it in our society to just make more money, and then that's kind of like our root of a lot of problems. But anyway. We so appreciate you being here today. We appreciate that you took the time to listen and to learn, and that you're liking and subscribing and commenting and starting a dialogue with us. We love that. So we thank you for being here and taking time to improve your life.
Yeah. And let us know what you want to hear about, please. We
If
want to
you have a
talk about
topic.
what you want to hear about.
Exactly. So you go do you and be the best you can. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.